Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Clanker Wanker, and today I'm going to be talking about what Gaijin can do to fix War Thunder simulator battles, specifically Air Sim. We all know that Sim is kind of on a downhill slope right now with the addition of Fox 3 missiles. Um, the Russian missiles are worse, the Russian radars are worse, despite the fact that they got the new RWRs, their situational awareness is still poor. They can't really capitalize on the fact that they know what aircraft is where because they can't target them with their BVR missiles because their radars are dog shit. Um, and so that's kind of the first thing I wanted to talk about. But before I get into that, I just want to say stick around till the end of the video because the last thing that I talk about, which is game mode changes, is probably the most important thing. I'll leave a timestamp down somewhere up here on the screen for you guys to click on it if you just want to skip to it. It's by far the most important part of this video. So without further ado, make sure to like, subscribe for more, and we'll just jump right into it. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about radar changes. So Gaijin, in my opinion, needs to take a serious look at how all of the different radars in game compare to each other in terms of like practical use cases. Because not only are the radars in game simply unbalanced, but they're also completely unrealistic. Um, Now, when I say that, I'm mainly talking about the F-16 and the F-14 in comparison to things like the F-15 and the Su-27. Um, so, what do I mean by this? Both the F-16 and the F-14 radars, for the most part, feel pretty fleshed out. Obviously, the Tomcat has some issues tracking in rear aspect, but we expect that from a radar that's basically using high PRF for everything. Other than that, these two radars feel responsive, quick to update, easy to use, and overall feel like what you would expect from a well designed, high budget piece of military equipment. They feel reliable. Um, the F-15 and the Su-27 radars, on the other hand, feel massively handicapped, and in some cases are borderline unplayable. The flanker for sure has the short end of the stick here because it can literally take more than 16 seconds from when a target enters your detection range to the time you get a stable TWS lock, which is completely unacceptable. This radar is so bad that by the time you acquire a radar picture of an opponent, they could already have an AMRAM halfway to you by now because the detection range is very short. Um, Now, the radar used in game by the F-15C MSIP 2 is still in use, so the exact numbers are classified, but it's widely known that the F-15 radar, as well as the flankers, should absolutely mop the floor with the F-16 radar. We're talking about detecting fighter-sized targets like 80 to 90 miles away, and that makes sense, right? So, if we just think about this with our brains here, take the F-15, for example. It's a model from 2003 that we have in game. So why on earth would they even bother making a new version of the APG-63 for it when the F-16 radar already exists? It's cheaper, stronger, smaller, and lighter. That wouldn't make any sense, would it? Um, Obviously, the Eagles radar should be way better. And I think the flankers too. They're contemporaries of each other. I think this is part of a larger conversation we need to have with Gaijin, which is that now that we're starting to get into aircraft that are still in service, things are going to come up that there simply aren't any sources for. Now, the way that Gaijin currently operates is that you need to be able to provide a source to get a lot of these things corrected with a complete disregard for things that are just common sense, but I digress. I think that they should increase the detection ranges for the Eagle and the Flanker out to 80 miles for fighter-sized targets, at least, and do whatever tweaks needed to make them feel like you can rely upon them because they just feel like garbage at the moment. They feel like a liability. So, point number two that I wanted to talk about, the Gripen. Now, this one might be controversial because it is just nerfed. No, wait, no. Everybody knows that nerf wasn't enough. Okay, why on earth do we have a Canard Delta Wing with better energy retention than the Flanker? Seriously, Gaijin? I don't know what they're smoking over there, but the last time I checked, adding canards adds lift, which increases induced drag. This thing should have comparable energy retention to the Mirage, only a little bit better because it has a higher thrust to weight. When an F-15 or an F-16 starts to rate fight against it, it shouldn't be able to keep going for very long. Eventually, it's going to get slow and fall behind. What we have currently in game is an aircraft that has both the strongest radar missiles, the strongest IR missiles for sim, because they're smokeless, and a flight model that literally no aircraft can even come close to in any aspect for more than one singular turn, with absolutely no counterplay. And it also has unlimited flares and an engine that burns slightly above room temperature. Gaijin, please, I am begging you, give it the reasonable performance that you would expect from a Canard Delta Wing. Okay, Gripen rant out of the way. Now let's talk about map changes. Now this is something that I've been thinking about for a while now, and something that I truly believe could make the gameplay loop feel more real and way less chaotic is increasing the map size. And I mean bigly. Large Afghanistan, Sinai, Rocky Canyon, all too small. Players should be able to climb up to 30,000 feet and still not be within 100 miles of the front line, in my opinion. We've gotten to the point where even on the bigger maps, I can be firing at aircraft taking off from their runway within 5 minutes after taking off, and I can almost do it from my side of the map. That's a bit silly, okay? There's also just too many aircraft playing in the playable area. So things just get very hectic and unpredictable, and the gameplay just feels very strained. It feels like no matter what you do, there's always a higher than what should be expected possibility of somebody being behind you when you don't know it. It's almost impossible to maintain your situational awareness in this environment. Currently, the largest map we have in game is like 128 by 128 kilometers. We need something like double that to allow these aircraft to really stretch their legs. Obviously, some runways can be like closer to the front line than others, so there would be options for people who don't want to fly that far as well. So now let's talk about game mode changes. Now, this is the biggest thing. The one thing that if they changed this thing and nothing else, I would be happy is game modes. It's about damn time Gaijin did something about the god-awful gameplay loop that we have in Sim right now. As well as the balance between red and blue team. So we're now getting into the modern era where the USSR collapsed and thus Russia had a major stall in the development of new aircraft and missile technology. People complain about balance. People complain about realism. Inevitably, those two goals have become diametrically opposed to one another because the game that we play is basically a flat PvP sandbox with some random ground targets scattered here and there and no clear objective. We play essentially in the Wild West where it's every man for himself and you can rely on zero outside support to help you survive. But in real life, this simply wasn't the case. American and Western aircraft are designed to be very capable of operating independently behind enemy lines. They have all of the situational awareness tools they need to do so. Russian doctrine was very different from Western doctrine. Most of their fighters were designed to be directed from aerial or ground-based early warning radars to intercept supported by friendly SAM sites. In real life, the Russians, who simply didn't have the budget to compete with all of NATO, chose to develop cheap, high probability of kill surface to air missiles rather than risking valuable fighter aircraft and pilots. Putting these aircraft up against NATO in a pitched fight with no support is just downright unfair to the designs and to the players, and we've seen the consequences. Our matchmakers dying. Top tier sim is going to be a thing of the past if they don't change something soon. Now, if I were Gaijin, I would do a couple of things to the game mode we have now. And I shouldn't say the game mode we have now. Basically, change it up, like the whole thing. Start from scratch. So, new hypothetical game mode. First of all, 250 by 250 kilometer wide maps. Then I give Red Team a couple of S-300 missile batteries. All right? Because, again, their doctrine is to operate within S-300 or S-400 or whatever surface-to-air missile cover so that they have support, so that their pilots and don't die in their valuable aircraft because they can't afford to lose them. Now, these missiles that I'm talking about, these S-300s, I think they have a range against fighters of about 100 kilometers against a non-maneuvering target, right? So, but against a maneuvering target, it would realistically be like less than half of that if the pilot did a good job. Then we could give the blue team some AGM-88 harms. Now, these have a max range of roughly half of that of the S-300, meaning it would still be challenging for a blue team member to take one of these out, even on its own without any fighters harassing them. Now, these S-300 sites would probably be placed in such a way that their coverages overlap, but that they don't extend into blue team's territory, and the coverage from one battery wouldn't extend to the location of the other, meaning you wouldn't have to destroy both radars in order to come in and like strafe the launcher of the other one. Now, this would put these launchers pretty far back. Like I said, the map is 250 by 250. You cut that in half, 125. These launchers have a range of 100. So it would be like 25 kilometers from the back of the map, of a very large map. So red team would be able to defend them pretty easily, as blue team would have to be flying at high altitude, well into their map in order to take them out with harms. But again, blue team has the better missiles and situational awareness, so a well-coordinated team could do it. Now, there's something that I've always had a gripe with in all video games, which is a lack of consequences for achieving or not achieving an objective. So right now, if you destroy a bunch of attackers or a surveillance aircraft, nothing really happens except the enemy's tickets go down. So in our new hypothetical game mode, if the blue team manages to destroy these S-300 sites, a few minutes later, a group of B-52 bombers will spawn on the blue team's edge of the map. The bombers will then fly into the red team's airspace to permanently destroy strategic infrastructure, such as airfields, factories, railroads, ammo depots, which will have a massive ticket impact and could significantly impact the red team's ability to respond to future incursions. Now, as a counter, if the red team manages to destroy the bombers, there will be a slightly smaller ticket penalty than if the bombers were to succeed. And if they don't manage to destroy the SAMs in the first place within, say, about 45 minutes of the match starting, the red team will gain access to new help in the form of something like, I don't know, attack helicopters or something that would assist in ground battles that occur on the red team's territory and gradually drain blue team's tickets unless they are destroyed before they can engage the ground targets. And they would be sort of a persistent thing that spawned every time a ground battle spawned. So now there might also be a way for SAMs to be repaired in the future, probably involving the use of Russian cargo helicopters, because that would be really cool. Seeing a MI whatever the fuck carrying a big ass cargo box to a SAM site. Um, Now, depending on how easily or difficult it is for the Russians to defend their S-300s, it might also be necessary to add an early warning radar to alert the red team whenever the blue team entered their airspace, and those would also be able to be destroyed. Now, that was all just an example. Basically, Gaijin needs to balance these aircraft in sim with the game mode. Um, because, and this is another issue, flight model is not nearly as important in sim as it is in RB. Okay? It's not. Not when you have Fox 3s. Sim just, in general, has completely different considerations for balance when it comes to aircraft performance and weapon systems than RB does. Okay? So you cannot balance these aircraft. You cannot balance these teams by changing the flight performance or by adding new aircraft because that's just not how sim works. You have to balance it with the game modes at some point. So, with that being said, with these changes, I dare say you could bring back historical matchmaking where NATO aircraft return to the blue team despite whatever nation they technically fly for in game, whatever tech tree they're in. We would have a brand new game mode with different pacing, more strategic gameplay elements, and a dynamic war zone that can be heavily influenced by player actions. In my opinion, these are all standard features for any modern PvP game that should have been part of Gaijin's game mode formula from the very start. And I would love to see them try something like this in the future. I think this is something the community really should be pushing for a lot harder than we are. But let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments. Let me know. Tell me if it's a good idea, if you think it's a bad idea, if you'd like to see it, what other things you think that Gaijin could do to balance simulator battles specifically. Let me know down in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.